Matthew chapter 6. I tell you what, before I get into Matthew 6, I need to make a correction. Tuesday night, I told y'all I was tired. I had driven in from Memphis before our Yom Kippur service, and I encourage you to do a word study on Leviticus 16:16. And I kept using the word para. Para. I told you that word was there and it was significant. Well, that word's not there. Para, I think, para in Hebrew actually means cow. Cow's not there. Why I kept saying para, I don't know. What I meant to say was mean, M-I-N, or mene. Those two words are kind of close though, right? Para and mene. But anyway, we will make that correction, I hope, as we go to YouTube. Krista is a master at fixing my misspeaking sometimes, but we'll make that correction before it goes to YouTube. But I wanted you to make that correction in your cerebral cortex and not go looking for para. Look for the word mean or mene. All right, Matthew chapter 6. Today we're going to do a study of this prayer found here. We're not going to do any Hebrew words or Greek words. This Holy Convocation message, I'm hoping not to be tedious in any way. Instead, what I want to do is share with you what came up in my spirit yesterday morning. I had left my home early and was driving across Nat Mountain. And it is my custom as I leave home to pray the prayer found here in Matthew chapter 6. Why do I pray it? Because Yeshua said, when you pray, say. When you pray, he said, say this. So I have made it a custom to do that very thing. And I had finished praying that prayer when I left, and I was just riding down the road, minding my own business, as happens oftentimes. When I heard this on the inside, that prayer fits perfectly on top of Sukkot and the Exodus. That prayer fits perfectly atop of Sukkot and the Exodus. In the instruction given to us about Sukkot, Leviticus says this: you shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am Yahweh your Elohim. So part of our celebration of Sukkot is to be remembering the Exodus story. I heard in my spirit that prayer fits perfectly atop of Sukkot and the Exodus. So as I drove on to my destination, I had a great time contemplating that statement, seeing that what I'd heard was true. I would have never thought about that on my own. I'd have never connected this prayer to the Exodus on my own. I rejoice that the Ruach HaKodesh made that point to me. And this morning, what I'd like to do is just share with you some of the things I saw as I examined the statement that was made. So Matthew chapter 6, let's look in verse 9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. In Luke chapter 11, Luke tells us that the disciples had asked Yeshua to teach them to pray. And as I said earlier, his response was, well, when you pray, say this. He didn't say something like this. He said, say this. Well, let's consider these words here that he began with in light of Exodus. Our Father who is in heaven. Where is Yahweh? Heaven. He's in heaven. Where is heaven? All around us. So the Exodus story begins with Moses on the backside of the desert tending to sheep and possibly unaware that where he was, Yahweh was. Yahweh is everywhere. It was on the backside of that desert that he encountered Yahweh. This prayer is a reminder to us, actually a declaration to us, that we need to be aware that everywhere we go and no matter where we are, Yahweh is there. Geographically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, everywhere we are, there He is. Heaven is all around us. Thus, Yahweh is all around us. And consider this. Moses had spent 40 years being forgotten. He used to be important. He used to be somebody. He used to have riches and prestige and respect, but he spent 40 years being forgotten. Now all he does is tend to his father-in-law's sheep. Not his sheep, his father-in-law's sheep. Now he made that choice, but nonetheless, having to live it out day after day after day would be difficult on anybody. Knowing what he left and knowing where he's at. Hebrews 11 says this about Moses. Hebrews 11:24, if you want to look at it. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of Yahweh than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of the Messiah greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Notice that word there, endured. He endured. That's letting us know that what he had to do wasn't easy. He made that choice, but it wasn't easy. He had to be strong, he had to be steadfast to do what he did. Moses now is on the backside of the desert 40 years later, needing to be delivered from the mediocre life that he's living. Which actually works out great, because Yahweh was needing somebody to deliver the children of Israel. And who better to deliver them than a man that needed deliverance? We need to hear this. Yahweh cannot deliver us from where we are by leaving us where we are. If we're not willing to leave where we are, we can't be delivered. Moses needs to be delivered. In order to deliver him, Yahweh is going to have to pull him from where he is and put him in another place. So if we are crying out internally or externally for change, we should be expecting to hear Yahweh assigning us something to do. If we don't like where we are, if it feels mediocre, if it feels like that nothing is happening, we should be expecting Yahweh to give us an assignment of some kind. And we shouldn't be like Moses, who came up with a plethora of reasons not to do it, right? We should be expecting to hear it and excited about doing it. We should be expecting him to give us assignments designed to deliver us and promote his kingdom at the same time. So the prayer begins, Our Father who is in heaven, declaring to us Yahweh's all around us on the backside of our deserts, waiting to talk to us if we will focus on him like Moses did there on the burning bush. The next phrase is what? Hallowed be your name. When Yahweh told Moses to go to Egypt, one of the first things Moses said to Yahweh was, if I go to Egypt and tell the children of Israel that the Elohim of Abraham sent me to deliver them, the first thing they're going to say to me is, what's his name? I can't go there and tell them the Elohim of Abraham sent me without telling them what his name is. They won't listen to me. And Yahweh said, I am that I am. Tell them that I am has sent you. That's where most people stop reading. And most mainstream denominations particularly will tell you that he's the great I am. And that we don't really know his name, or that he has a multitude of names. But that's not true. You read the very next verse there in Exodus chapter 3, and Yahweh went on to say, furthermore, I am Yahweh, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my name forever, and my memorial to all generations. So there is no question about what his name is. Moses refused to go forward without knowing his name. Well, this prayer fits the top of the Exodus and Sukkot story perfectly. We are to pray, hallowed be your name. Yahweh declares at the beginning of Exodus what his name is. Knowing and using that name cannot be overstated. We may have learned it years ago. We don't need to grow too comfortable with it and think, well, okay, we know it. We need to know it and use it. People cannot worship the true Elohim without learning his name and knowing his name. We are to know it, use it, proclaim it, call upon it, exalt it, extol it, praise it, trust in it, magnify it, hallow it. You can't do any of those things if you don't know it, right? Oh, magnify Yahweh with me. Let us do what? Exalt his name together. You cannot exalt what you don't know, right? 6,823 times in the Masoretic text that name was known. It was written. Translators took it out. We have to be determined not to let them steal it from us. Amen. The name of Yahweh is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and they're safe, right? Moses demanded to know the name. He could not accomplish what he had to accomplish without the name, and neither can we. When Moses went into Egypt, he told Aaron and the others that Yahweh had sent him there. He then went before Pharaoh, and he began his pronouncements with Pharaoh this way: Thus saith Yahweh. That's the way he began his interaction with Pharaoh. Thus saith Yahweh, let my people go. Pharaoh, nor all the powers, nor all the gods of Egypt could withstand a proclamation coming from Yahweh. And Moses knew that, and we need to understand that as well. Thus saith Yahweh, if he says, let my people go, there's nobody in Egypt who has the power to stop that from being so. I went to high school with a guy named Steve. I won't give you his last name, but his name was Steve too. He was a year older than I, maybe 2, but I think he was only 1 grade ahead of me. When he was 13 years old, his Marine Corps dad took his belt off to discipline him. They were down in the basement of their home, and Steve said that he decided that wasn't going to happen. And so he said to his dad, you're not going to whip me with that belt. And the Marine Corps dad said, yes, I am. Either before the fight or after the fight, I am. And Steve said that he planted his feet and said, well, then I guess it'll be after the fight. At the risk of offending your sensitivities with the details of the rest of that story, let me say this. Steve should have chose more wisely. Right? Yahweh said, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no, I will not let them go. Yahweh said, oh, yes, you will. It'll be before the plagues or after the plagues, but you're going to let them go. Pharaoh said, well, I guess it'll be after the plagues. Pharaoh should have chosen more wisely than that. Because when Yahweh says something is going to be, it's going to be. We need to know the name and we need to know what Yahweh says. Knowing that both of those things and how to use them alters circumstances in our favor. I'm going to say that again. Knowing his name and knowing how to use it based on what he says alters the circumstances of our life. Hallowed be your name. Next, verse 10, Matthew 6. Your kingdom come. Your will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Yahweh's kingdom, the realm of his rule, the realm where he rules. Yeshua said, when you pray, pray and say, Father, the realm of your rule come or appear. Where does Yahweh rule? His rule expands to everywhere, right? So the prayer is acknowledging that His rule is everywhere, it expands to everywhere. It's saying now, let it appear right here where I'm at and in this situation and in this circumstance. I know, I acknowledge that you have the authority and the power to rule in every situation. Therefore, I'm asking you to come and rule right here. Rule on earth as you do in heaven. It's amazing when we see Yahweh do things for us that can be kind of explained. But what if we begin to imagine Him doing things that defy explanation? Let me give you just this quick illustration. I've seen Him do amazing things. And yesterday when I was riding around thinking about all this, one of the things, when I thought about all the amazing things He's done for me, one of the first things that popped in my mind was when we moved to Fort Worth, Texas. I had volunteered to work for Heritage of Faith Christian Center. Volunteered to work for free. I didn't have a job. I had a family of 6. And I didn't tell anybody it was tight. Everybody there assumed because I volunteered to work for free, I must be wealthy. I must have a lot of money. I didn't say anything to them to change the way they thought. But what we found is there in Benbrooks, where we live, we got up one Saturday morning and there was nothing in our refrigerator. When I say nothing, I mean when you open the door, there's nothing in there. And when you open the cupboards, and I know because I went to every cupboard and opened them, there was nothing in the cupboards. You know, sometimes women will buy things, wives will buy things and put them in the cupboards, and you're never going to eat them anyway, but they just have to be there to fill up space. None of that stuff was in the cupboard either. It was empty. Had no money, no food. 4 children. I didn't start fretting. I didn't start wringing my hands. I didn't start pacing. I didn't start frantically crying out. I just went to the couch and sat down. Wasn't anything I could do about it that day. Why fret? If anything gets done, Yahweh's got to do it. I just went to the living room, sat down on the couch. I hadn't been sitting there very long when the doorbell rang. I got up and wondered who could be coming to our house on Saturday morning. We don't know anybody. We had just moved there, hadn't been there very long. We didn't know anybody. Pardon me. I went and opened the door, and there stood a guy named Justin. He was going to be attending, or was attending, this same Bible school we'd gone out there to attend. And when I opened the door, he extended his hand with a check in it. And he began apologizing to me. Mr. Martin, I know you don't need this. But I woke up this morning and he said, God told me I needed to bring you this money. And I hope it doesn't offend you because I know you don't need it. And I kept trying to dismiss it, saying, they don't need my money. They don't need my money. But all morning long, he wouldn't let me rest until I left the house to come here. I had to give it to you, even if you don't need it. Well, I didn't say, oh, son, you don't have a clue how much we needed it. Oh, my gosh, we're desperate. Because I didn't want it to spread anywhere else. For anybody else to feel, what's the word? Say again? Obligated. Obligated to try to help us. Thank you very much. I just said, Justin, you heard, you obeyed, and I thank you for it. It's a blessing. Shook his hand, hugged his neck, sent him on the way, and then we did the rejoicing on the inside of my house. The point being, I have seen Yahweh do amazing things like that over and over and over. Whether it was financially or healing, I've seen him do healings for me and for my family. It's amazing. When things like that happen, though, even though it causes you to stand in awe of the Elohim we serve, even though you can know Yahweh's the only one who knew what we needed and supplied that need, I can tell you that story and you can see how he could and would do that, and it becomes explainable and understandable that he would do that. But what if we begin to comprehend that there is no end to Yahweh's rule, no end to his power? He rules over all things, and he can do things that defy explanation. This prayer fits the top of the Exodus and Sukkot story perfectly. Yahweh's kingdom appear and his will being done on earth as it is in heaven. Yahweh showed in the Exodus story that his power and rule included power over the Nile River. That his power and rule included power over frogs and lice and flies. His power included power over pestilence and darkness and hail and locusts. He showed that his power and rule included power over the Red Sea. If Yahweh told the sea to get out of the way, you had no choice but to obey. Understand that in each of those things, though, that I just mentioned, Yahweh's power was released by and through the cooperation between Yahweh and Moses, or sometimes Aaron. Yahweh didn't just send these pestilences or these plagues, and Yahweh didn't just divide the Red Sea. He did it by cooperating with Moses and having Moses cooperate with him. He had Moses stretch forth his rod and make declarations that released his power upon the Red Sea. And there are a lot of illustrations of it even after the Red Sea. The bitter water being made sweet, the water coming forth from the rock. Yahweh demonstrated that his rule and power extends to every dimensions. All he needs is for us to believe that too and cooperate with him so it can come to pass. He can do things that defy explanation if we will cooperate with him. This prayer is a call for us to awaken to the magnificent power of the Elohim of the Exodus. It is a call for us to awaken to the rule of Yahweh over everything and to cooperate with him concerning those things by declaring, your kingdom come, your will be done. Every time we step into a situation where we think, well, that looks impossible, your kingdom come, your will be done. Because in his kingdom and with his will and his power, nothing is impossible. So we declare it, your kingdom, come, appear, your will be done. This prayer fits the top of the Exodus and Sukkot perfectly. Then it says this, give us this day our daily bread. Well, a perfect illustration of how this prayer fits the top of the Exodus. Manna came down from heaven for 40 years. How often did it come down? Almost every day. Almost. When did it actually come down? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. None on Saturday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. None on Saturday. For 40 years, Yahweh demonstrated that he was there to supply their need. And for 40 years, Yahweh demonstrated the hallowedness and the sacredness of the seventh day. He ingrained that in them. That seventh day is different than all of the other days. Are we diligent to do the two things that are being revealed to us here? That is to ask for daily bread and to remember the Sabbath. Ask for daily bread and to remember the Sabbath. You can't talk about manna, in my opinion, the daily bread, without talking about the holiness of the Sabbath. Well, Yahweh knows what I have need of. I don't have to ask him. Well, is that right? Yeshua said, when you pray, say this, give us. So, if Yeshua said, when you pray, say, give us our daily bread, I guess we could say we only need to pray for provisions of Yahweh on days when we need provisions. And if you need something today, today's a good day to pray for it. Yeshua said there in Matthew chapter 6, if you back up to verse 6, before he began giving us the words of this prayer, he said, your Father knows what you have need of before you ask. He said that in verse 6. So if he said your Father knows what you have need of before you ask, listen, to some people you'd think the next verse said, so you don't really need to pray. But that's not what he said. Your Father knows what you have need of before you ask, so when you pray, say this, give us this day our daily bread. The point being, he knows what you have need of before you pray, so he's already made provision of that. He's already got it in place. You just need to ask for it and receive it. Yahweh knows what we have need of before we pray, so say. And then verse 12, forgive us of our debts as we forgive our debtors. You know, people become indebted to us. Not necessarily financially, but emotionally. People trespass against us. Sometimes they mean to, sometimes they don't mean to. Sometimes they don't even know they did. We have lines and boundaries that govern our relationships that sometimes people aren't even aware of the lines and boundaries. But we're aware of it, and when they cross them, it puts a strain on the relationship, right? We need them to seek forgiveness for this thing they have done that has put them in debt to us. That is, they owe us an explanation for why they did that or why they said that. They owe us an apology, or they owe us a promise that they won't do that anymore in order to mend the relationship. We're familiar in life with having to ask for forgiveness, and familiar in life with having those whom we feel should be asking us for forgiveness. Relationships require standards and boundaries and respect for those standards and boundaries. This prayer fits perfectly atop of Sukkot in the Exodus. The children of Israel will be made to see how to safeguard their relationship with Yahweh. He will not hide from them the standard and boundaries that he requires. He will not let them think for 1 minute they can live any way they want to and still be in a tight relationship with him. He will not allow them to think they can set the standard and the boundaries for a relationship with him. He carries them to Mount Sinai. He sets the standard and he sets the boundaries. I will be your Elohim, you will be my people, but the terms of our covenant are these. And when Moses delivered the terms of that covenant to the children of Israel, we are told that they heard it, and with one accord they replied, all that he has said, we will do. Right? We will abide by his standards. We will abide by his boundaries. And we understand that if we trespass, then we're going to need to get forgiveness. We can't just ignore it. We can't just pretend it didn't happen. We got to get forgiveness so that that relationship is not strained. This prayer is a reminder that just as we expect others to honor the standards and boundaries of our relationship, Yahweh expects the same from us. Verse 13, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, for yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. The beauty and power of this prayer is revealed in every detail of the Exodus. Lead us not into temptation. That's a reference to tests or trials. We are told to ask Yahweh to not allow us to go into these places of tests and trials. Exodus 13:17 says this, It came to pass when Pharaoh had let the people go that Yahweh led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For Yahweh said, lest perhaps the people repent when they see war. He didn't want to lead them into that test. He didn't want to lead them into that trial. He was protecting them. Yeshua teaches us to pray and say to the Father, do not lead or do not allow us to go into test. Do not allow us to go into any experience of that which is evil. Yahweh gets blamed for a lot of things that we do to ourselves or that is done to us by devils and demons. My senior year of high school, one night on a wrestling mat, my left knee came unhinged. The cartilage tore in my knee and it allowed that bone down there to shift. When it shifted, it locked my leg and I couldn't move it, and it was just like you were stabbing me with a knife. It hurt bad. A few days after tearing it, I was in the hospital having surgery on it. If I had to go back and do over, I wouldn't, but I was just doing what my coach told me I had to do. There was no such thing in 1976 of orthoscopic surgery. Now they poke a little hole in you and they go in and fix it and sew that little hole up. But they cut me about this far on one side of my knee and about that far on the other side of my knee, and got all of that cartilage out and sewed me back up. Mentally, and I say mentally because all I'd ever thought about was I wanted to play football when I left high school and in college somewhere, and I knew this was going to greatly affect the interest of colleges, because back then they didn't have any such thing as orthoscopic surgery. So I was in pain physically and mentally. The day of surgery, a deacon from my church came by to visit me and had these loving, encouraging words to say. Well, Steve, God had to put you flat on your back and make you look up. Well, thank you for coming by. In one sentence, he accused me of living my life with no regard for Yahweh, and accused Yahweh of breaking my knee. That's two horrible accusations to make. It's one thing to make an accusation against me, but it's a different thing to make an accusation against Yahweh. He's accusing Yahweh of doing that to me. His view of tragedies in our lives is also the view of multitudes of those who attend churches. If a tragedy happens, they think God's testing them. James said, let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of Yahweh. For Yahweh cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempts he any man. Temptations, tests, and trials do not come from Yahweh. It wasn't Yahweh who attacked Job. And Yahweh was willing and ready to deliver Job from the attack he was under whenever Job got ready. Job finally stood up. We're told in the last part of the book, I think we get all the way to chapter 42, but in the last part of the book, Job finally stood up out of that garbage heap, threw those ashes off of him, and began to declare his deliverance, and immediately his deliverance came. So Job wasn't waiting on Yahweh. Yahweh was waiting on Job. And in the tests and trials that we go through, we stay in them far too long if we're led to believe that Yahweh put us there. If we believe Yahweh put us there, we're going to stay there longer than we have to stay. Because Yahweh did not put us in any tragedy, in any test, or in any trial. Amen. Our deliverance comes when we see Him as the one who gets us out of it, not the one who put us in it. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. That's who Yahweh is, the one who delivers us from evil. And I got to ask you, what is evil? If He's delivering us from evil, what is He delivering us from? Lack, want, debt, distress, sickness, disease. Do a study of the Hebrew word evil, and that's what you'll discover. Deliver us from evil means deliver us from lack and want, debt and distress, sickness and disease. That's who Yahweh is, the one that delivers us. That's what He did for the children of Israel, and that's what He desires to do for us. Then it says this, yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Say it this way, the kingdom, well, Father, that's yours. The power, that's also yours. And the glory, that's yours. In the beginning, Yahweh was. So any power of any entity anywhere came from Him. Here's what I mean. Any entity who derived any power from Yahweh and then rebels against Yahweh cannot become more powerful than Yahweh. He was foolish when he thought he could. And any entity who derived power from Yahweh and rebelled against Yahweh cannot take Yahweh's kingdom away from him. Yahweh did not make him that powerful, right? Yahweh's kingdom, the good news is, Yahweh's kingdom is still intact. His power is unmatched and His glory is unquestionable. And we acknowledge that in this prayer, and we see that in the Exodus and in Sukkot. When we pray, we say these things. Yeshua taught us what to say. Well, now the Ruach HaKodesh is saying to us that we should let Sukkot and the Exodus help us visualize the life-changing potential that's found in that prayer. We should look at the Exodus and let it help us visualize the potential in the power of saying the things that Yeshua told us to say. The Exodus reveals to us that Yahweh rules with power and that He is glorious. If you agree with that, say hallelujah. Hallelujah. If you haven't ever, I encourage you again. Begin to pray the way Yeshua said pray. When you pray, say these things. And now when you say them, begin to visualize what that means. He can defy explanation in doing things for us when we ask Him. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. As His name is put upon you, so shall He Himself bless you. Hallelujah.